You see, there is something rather extraordinary that happens to a person around the age of 40. Not to everyone, mind you, but to those who have been paying attention, to those who have not been entirely asleep through the first half of their lives. And what happens is this: they wake up, not with a jolt, not with some dramatic revelation necessarily, but with a quiet recognition that everything they thought was important, well, it simply is not. Now, this is curious, because we have been told our entire lives that youth is the golden time, that the 20s and 30s are when life really happens, when we are supposed to be climbing ladders and making names for ourselves and proving to the world that we matter. And so we spend those decades running. Running after what exactly? Running after an idea of success that somebody else handed to us, an idea of happiness that came from some magazine or some television program, an idea of who we should be that has nothing whatsoever to do with who we actually are. I remember being 25 and thinking I had it all figured out. I knew exactly where I was going and exactly how to get there. So I was so certain, so absolutely convinced that if I just worked hard enough, if I just achieved enough, if I just accumulated enough, then I would finally be happy. And you know what happened? I worked hard, I achieved, I accumulated. And when I got there, when I reached that place I thought was the destination, I looked around and said, is that all? Because you see, the first 40 years of life, they are really a kind of preparation. Not a preparation in the way we usually think of it, as in preparing for something better later. No, it is more like the way a caterpillar prepares to become a butterfly. The caterpillar does not know it is preparing. It is simply living, eating leaves, crawling around, doing what caterpillars do. But all the while, something is building inside it. Something is getting ready. This is what your 20s and 30s are. You are the caterpillar. You think you are just living your life, making your mistakes, having your heartbreaks, building your career, trying to figure out who you are supposed to be. But really, you are gathering material. You are collecting experiences. You are learning lessons that you will not understand until much, much later. When you are young, life feels urgent. Everything matters so desperately much. That job you did not get, that person who rejected you, that mistake you made at the party last weekend. It all feels like the end of the world. Because when you are young, you believe that every moment is defining you, that every choice is permanent, that every failure is a judgment on your worth as a human being. But here is what nobody tells you.
What's wrong with their user interfaces? Well, the problem with them is really sort of in the bottom 40 there. It's this stuff right here. They all have these keyboards that are there whether you need them or not to be there. And they all have these control buttons that are fixed in plastic and are the same for every application. Well, every application wants a slightly different user interface, a slightly optimized set of buttons just for it. And what happens if you think of a great idea 6 months from now? You can't run around and add a button to these things. They're already shipped. So what do? It doesn't work because the buttons and the controls can't change. They can't change for each application, and they can't change down the road if you think of another great idea you want to add to this product. Well, how do you solve this? It turns out we have solved it. We solved it in computers 20 years ago. We solved it with a bitmap screen that could display anything we want, put any user interface up, and a pointing device. We solved it with the mouse, right? We solved this problem. So how are we going to take this to a mobile device? Well, what we're going to do is get rid of all these buttons and just make a giant screen. A giant screen. Now, how are we going to communicate this? We don't want to carry around a mouse, right? So what are we going to do? Oh, a stylus, right? We're going to use a stylus. No. No. Who wants a stylus? You have to get them and put them away and you lose them. Yuck. Nobody wants a stylus. So let's not use a stylus. We're going to use the best pointing device in the world. We're going to use a pointing device that we're all born with. We're born with 10 of them. We're going to use our fingers.
Yet somehow, London's St. Pancras and Belgium's Antwerp Central use nearly identical truss mathematics. Buenos Aires' Retiro station mirrors Parisian ironwork angles. Melbourne's Flinders Street station aligns with the same geometric proportions used in Berlin and Warsaw. In architecture, coincidence happens. But not this often, not this precisely, not this globally. What we're looking at doesn't resemble a style. It resembles a network. A system with nodes around the world, built to the same frequency, the same proportions, the same unseen logic. Copy-paste architecture in an era that supposedly had no copy-paste function. Nobody asks where the style came from. Nobody asks why it appears fully formed, with no prototypes, no trial versions, no ugly early phase mistakes. It just arrives, fully mature, perfectly scaled, universal, and that's when you start to wonder, maybe these stations weren't designed to impress travelers. Maybe they were built to interface with each other. Pieces of a global machine disguised as public buildings. Now let's go underground. The part of train stations nobody photographs, nobody tours, nobody explains. Beneath almost every major station built before 1900, you find something strange. Water. Not a little. A lot. Huge cisterns, flooded vaults, brick tunnels wide enough for small boats. Channels that don't point toward drains, they point toward pressure chambers. These spaces are far too large to be rainwater runoff. Their engineering is too precise to be accidental flooding, and their layout repeats from city to city like components of a machine. In Paris, under Gare du Nord, tunnels run parallel to the tracks, not to drain them, but to feed them. In Antwerp, a 4-story substructure exists with basins and sluice gates, older looking than the station above. In London, St. Pancras sits atop brick vaults so massive they resemble the basements of ancient bathhouses. Engineers today call this early drainage infrastructure. Convenient. But drainage doesn't require symmetrical chambers, pressure locks, or reinforced floors designed to bear vertical load changes. Hydraulic systems do, and when you stack enough examples together, a picture forms. These were not buildings that happened to sit near rivers. They were buildings that depended on rivers. Stations placed beside canals, lakes, diverted waterways. Every placement intentional, as if water was their primary energy source. Almost like a forgotten rail network wasn't powered from above, but from below. A machine hiding its heart underground. Here's where everything shifts. Train stations weren't just architectural shells, they were active mechanisms built around water and pressure. Think about it. Turntables, the massive rotating platforms that reoriented entire locomotives, were often powered not by steam engines, but by underground hydraulic pistons. Freight lifts, designed to raise cargo the size of a small house, ran on water pressure. Switch points and braking systems used vacuum suction and pressurized reservoirs. And the technology wasn't fringe, it was mainstream. In the 1860s, engineering journals documented hydraulic propulsion, water pressure engines, and atmospheric rail systems. Yet today, none of these appear in textbooks.
This is a big deal. This was designed. You think Chick-fil-A's designed for addiction? This was highly intentional. Phone in its settings tells you how far it has to be off of your body to prevent cancer. It tells you if you go to your settings to general, you scroll all the way down to legal and regulatory. Who knew this was in the BOWS? Do you see it?
I'm in it.
Legal and regulatory, click it. The very bottom one says RF exposure. That stands for radio frequency exposure. And then it tells you, mine is on the second paragraph. This must be 5 millimeter separation. radiation off of your body. It's about a pencil eraser. So they're covered when you get brain cancer because you put your phone to your head.
I always speak on speakerphone.
You bet you do. Distance is your friend with radio frequency, with electromagnetic fields. But they just came out with a study. It just literally, the further this is away from you, the better. We're seeing a higher rate of testicular cancer on young men because they put their phone. Get your phone out of your pocket. Get it away from your testicles.
That's crazy.
Yes. So back when these were smaller and women put them in their breast, we saw breast cancers the shape of that lithium battery in there. This is radioactive. So you get it off your person. You speak on speakerphone with it, right? You don't put it up your head. You for sure don't have it on your head driving down a road in a metal tube where it's having to work super hard to find a cell signal. So it's putting out more electromagnetic field.